right, let me cut that intro off before somebody gets in their feelings. Now, welcome back to another miserable episode of Exhaust Sports Auto. You join me in the cold, rain, fog, very similar to what I saw in San Diego actually, except it snowed there. I was like one of the first wave of people to go to this press event, so I saw, some pretty big names, Redline and, Alex on Autos, people like that. And I personally got to meet Forrest Auto, super humble guy, as well as Micah from Kelly Blue Book, who now has his own YouTube channel. I've also spent my time mainly with Savagegeese, who is my driving partner for the event. So I'll leave all their channels in the description box below. Now I know you guys don't even really subscribe to me, but I'd greatly appreciate if you could at least show them some love. So guys, if you're watching, I'm gonna send about a wave of 9 people your way. So I hope the servers can handle this. Jokes aside, let's get right into the meat and potatoes and why you're here. The 2020 Kia Soul. This car, I'm not gonna BS around. This is one to put on the short list if you're shopping for a new automobile. This is a car that I would personally spend money on. Now, there is no greater compliment that I can give a car than that. Now, we drove 2 different models of the Kia Soul, the X line and the GT line with the 1.6 turbo, both of which are pretty new models for this car. Also, there's a different trim of Soul for almost everybody out there. There's a base model with 15-inch rims with a manual transmission, and other models as well with the 2-liter IVT, CVT transmission with smaller wheels as well with less options. Now let's start off with the exterior of this vehicle. The exterior on this car is absolutely brilliant. The previous generation Kia Soul, I wouldn't be caught dead in it, and I have no problem saying that. But this current generation, this new one, this is an amazing looking car in person, in video, whatever. It's got this Range Rover Camaro face to it, which is really awesome, really aggressive. And you can get this car like all blacked out and like murdered out. It'll look really good. I would definitely buy that car in a spec like that. The new Kia Soul does come with some pretty cool headlights, especially in the GT trims. You can get the GT line actually in the 2-liter, and there's a 1.6. So if you like the way it looks, I guess you can get that body styling with the 2-liter. But yeah, the headlights, really cool LEDs. However, in the X line that we drove, it came with full halogen incandescent lighting, which some people look at that as a con, but I personally don't. It's not going to cost a fortune to replace those headlights. If you look at the price of headlights, they're like $300 to $500 on like normal cars, normal new cars with LEDs. So it's kind of nice to see that they offer this kind of more budget, easy to maintain Soul with cheaper parts on it, like halogen headlamps. So I'm not against it. I'm glad that they offer it. Now, speaking of looks, the X line that we drove, it came with some body cladding on it. That's about the only thing that it came with. There is no all-wheel drive on that vehicle. There's no all-wheel drive on option on any of these trims. I don't really see that as a bad thing. It doesn't really need it. It's front-wheel drive. Put some all-season, some winter tires on it. You'll be just fine in the snow. The rear taillights look amazing. A lot of people like the previous gen one, and I think this looks better in every single way to the old one. Now, speaking of the old one, just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you didn't, because they sold over 1 million of these things. So this thing has a huge following. It's the only car of its kind. Everything else that it competed with died off. So this car, the fact that it remains, is awesome. So this design really matters. I like how this car retains its quirky styling that made millions of people apparently love it, while also changing it up and bringing in a new audience like myself and other journalists that were there. Almost everybody loved this, and almost everybody was saying that they would personally buy this vehicle. Now, the interior also follows suit. This is the main reason why this car is so incredible, especially for the price point, around 17 to 22 grand car. This is fantastic for the sheer amount of practicality that this has. The leg room, the headroom that this car has, front, rear, doesn't matter. It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it, especially in such a tiny car. They didn't screw the dimensions all that much. They only made it like 4 inches longer overall than the previous gen, but man, does this thing have a ton of space. It's like a CUV SUV killer almost. Also, there's an option to have like this cardboard tray thing that you can slide in and out to make the floor completely flat and flush with the rear seats. So really great to see that. High amounts, the practicality is so high in this that it's really a no-brainer to put this on a short list. Now, speaking of the interior, there's a level of solidity and also almost a sense of luxury to it. It's a really refined interior space for the most part. Yes, there's some hard plastics, but that's to be expected in this class of vehicle. Very similarly to the Kia Forte, this car does come standard with a 7-inch screen. So Apple CarPlay and Android Auto is available on this vehicle. And if you do step up to that GT model, you will get the new 10.25-inch wide screen in the center. Now, this is a really impressive screen. Me and Savagegeese were talking about this. It's got an awesome black level. So overall, just has a really high quality screen to it. It's also got a pretty booming audio system, especially when you option it out with the Harman Kardon, 640 watt. It's got the little thing on the side where it lights up. They even put like an LCD panel up against the door handle, where the Forte was like that piano gloss black plastic. They put this LCD thing that lights up in the dark. Or actually, no, sorry, not just the dark. They did that so it can light up, at any time of the day. And interesting stuff, it's part of the things that make this car interesting and quirky and what appealed to the original buyers of this car. So it's really cool to see all of that still retained in this vehicle. It's got an amazing climate control where it's separated from the screen. Much like, actually, it's very similar to the Veloster I have, which I'll do a review on this car as well. Climate control is amazing. The seats also really nice. The X trim that I drove and obviously the base trims are all going to get a cloth seat, which I really like. Very comfortable. Also, the leather seating in the GT lines, it's got a cloth insert, so that's really nice to see. These are much more comfortable than the Forte seats that we saw. Mainly because it doesn't have that pleather running through like the middle. The part where you sit, it's gonna be cloth, so you don't have to worry about it getting too cold or too hot. It's always gonna be cushy and soft, so that's really nice to see. So far, 2 for 2. I mean, Kia has outdone themselves with the exterior and the interior of this vehicle. Now, let's get into the drive. Now, as I mentioned briefly, the Kia Forte, this car essentially rides on the same platform, especially in the front. Now, the rear is slightly different because, it's like this crossover thing, but it essentially drives very similar to the Kia Forte, and that is a very good thing. I'm gonna first start off with the ride of the car. This car rides so good, and this was a huge concern for me with the Kia Soul. Like, just looking at it initially, I didn't think it was gonna be a good riding car, but I was blown away. It rides better than the Kia Forte that I reviewed, and that car was riding on 17-inch rims. The GT line and the X line both have 18-inch rims as standard on those trims, and it rode better than the Forte. So really happy to see that, and obviously the seat comfort is amazing as well. Now, the other things to note, the engine choices, it's very similar to the Forte. It's got the exact same 2-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder with 147 horsepower and about 132 pounds-feet of torque. Potent engine. This is the engine I would go for in this in the Kia Soul. I think it makes a lot of sense here. Now, this engine is also mated to the IVT, just like the Forte, so this thing gets amazing fuel efficiency, just like the Forte did. You can see it like close to 30 in like city driving or like mixed driving or whatever, so awesome to see that. That was another thing for me, being as practical as it is, it would make a lot of sense if this thing got good fuel efficiency. I'm happy to report that it does. Now, the 1.6, same motor as I have in this Veloster, is a 201 horsepower, 195 foot-pounds of torque that you're going to see in this car, the GT Forte, and the Elantra Sport. I'm not a huge fan of this engine, especially in this car, because I noticed a lot of lag or delay. It just didn't seem very linear to me, but it's not to say that it's a bad engine. I really like it in this car. I think I like it more here because my car is a manual. I don't know if that has something to do with the dual clutch or the fact that we're driving in the mountains. It was kind of, caught off guard, whatever. But the good thing about that 1.6, if you do choose to opt for it, it will still get pretty good fuel efficiency. It is the one turbo engine I've seen that does, much like in my car. I was driving really hard and it was in the mountains, so the elevation was higher, and I was getting about 24, 25 miles to the gallon, which is really good. I'm sure just like this car, it can get high 20s if you drove it kind of normally, so there's that. If you are interested, but it is like 27 grand, and I don't think that engine makes a lot of sense in the Soul. Like I said, the 2-liter, more than enough punch for what it is. I don't think people bought the original Soul for performance or anything like that, so I think the 2-liter makes sense here. Now, steering and brake feel very similar to the Forte. The brakes are pretty linear for the most part, a little bit on the firm side is what Savage said. The steering, much like the Forte, it's very quick, direct, but rather quick, more than it should be. That's why I'm like, 16-inch rims, or if you get a lower trim level, it'll definitely soften the ride first of all, so even more comfort. and also it'll kind of make the steering feel a little bit more natural. So there's that. But overall, really good. Everything feels natural, feels good to drive. It's solid. Speaking of solid, it's about 35% stiffer, the whole chassis, than the previous gen, so really nice to see that. Finally, I'm going to touch on the torsion beam. Yes, this car does come with a torsion beam, just like the Forte did. Again, just like that car, you're not really going to notice it. It's pretty good. It doesn't get out of hand when you go over potholes. I don't think there's going to be a multi-link. There's not even a multi-link in the 1.6 turbo. The only car you will see a multi-link in is the EV trim, which is not sold in all 50 states. Only like 12 or 13 states get it, but that car gets the multi-link because it needs to, essentially. They need to be able to hold that huge battery. I think it's like a 64 watt battery, so it needs to be able to hold that. That's why that car has a multi-link suspension. Overall, drivability is really high, especially a car for this price and for what it is. It's legitimately like a hatchback, you know? It drives really nice. It drives identical to the Forte, actually. That really makes this the SUV, CUV killer. It just almost doesn't make sense for you to go after something like that, because this car gets the gas mileage of a car. It drives like a car. It's got the space of an SUV. So this car makes a lot of sense, and I really respect it. And I'm glad that for this generation, they made it a legitimate car. You know, it's the Forte with all the practicality that you could ever want, and the Forte is a really good car if you haven't seen my review on it already. So I'm a huge fan of the Soul. I know that this is going to be another hot selling vehicle for them because the previous gen was. Now that this is a legitimate car, I can see a lot of the previous generation buyers flocking over to this one because it is that great of an improvement. It's night and day. So with that, that concludes my review and my quick look, really, of the 2020 Soul. If I ever get that as a press car, I'm going to do a more in-depth review on it. So if you guys enjoyed it, I would greatly appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel and liking this video. So thank you guys for watching. Take care and goodbye.